Okay, so I don't have to be an expert. I guess the fire was over there, right?
Yes, right.
That looks pretty rough. Okay.
It was one of the largest forest fires in Germany up to that date.
Auch noch nach Mitternacht rollen weitere Feuerwehrfahrzeuge nach Treuenbrietzen.
In total about 400 hectares. I know it's nothing in comparison to the dozens of thousands of hectares that sometimes burn in the States or in Russia or whatever, but in Germany it's quite something.
Hello there, Neil here. Thanks for listening in to On the Green Fence, DW's Environment Podcast. And today I'm in the eastern German state of Brandenburg in a place called Treuenbrietzen, to be precise. And this was the site of a huge forest fire back in 2018. And scientists are actually using this particular site here to come up with solutions to not only prevent forest fires in future, but also to find out, what exactly they can do after the forest fires have happened to make the forests more sustainable and more resilient. And I'm standing here right now with Professor Pierre Ibisch. He's a biologist and Professor for Nature Conservation at Eberswalde University for Sustainable Development. And ironically, it's raining right now. It's starting to rain. I guess you're happy about the rain, right?
Absolutely. So it is a dry region where we have poor rainfall, like around 500 millimeters annually. In the last years it has been less. In 2018, when the fire happened here, it was less than half of it actually. So it's a critical situation. Also now after the fire, vegetation has to recover. We are happy with any raindrop that's falling. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, well I suggest then maybe we could head across into, the forest that used to be a forest where the forest fire took place.
I just wonder I get some raincoat maybe.
Yeah, the rain's getting heavier. You're listening to On the Green Fence, DW's Environment Podcast, and my name is Neil King. And once we've geared up here a bit for the rain, we'll be back again in the forest that burnt down in 2018.
So we are here close to the area where possibly the fire started.
What started it, do you know?
Presumably ammunition was involved. So this is also very typical in this region here around Berlin. A lot of ammunition from Second World War and also afterwards. But it became obvious when the fire started and the firemen went in. They all of a sudden noticed there were explosions around them, so they had to leave, and clearly this area is heavily contaminated. Now we have a research project here, and as part of the preparation of this research project we did also a survey of the contamination, and in some parts it's really heavy, so it's even impossible to clean it and get the ammunition out of the soil. It would be possible, but it's very expensive and anyway not good for our research, so we have to adapt our plots and sites where we walk and do the research. And a key factor clearly is temperature. So in 2018 we had these record-breaking high temperatures, which then can lead to ignition. Mm-hmm. Clearly.
So the project that you're working on, what exactly is new about it and what are you trying to achieve with it?
Well, what we are trying to do is understand what did the fire do to the forest ecosystem, and does the forest ecosystem come back? What kind of treatments are good for supporting the process, for getting the forest back, and not just any forest, but a forest that afterwards would have a lower risk of burning again, and a forest that is more or less climate change robust, mm-hmm. Which is the big challenge, clearly, that we have to be prepared for environmental conditions that formerly have been unknown, mm-hmm. and where the question is it possible to adapt to the new climate, and to which climate now, or is it possible to buy some time? Maybe it's about that. that the forest at least can keep some functions and functionality and provide ecosystem services in the next decades.
So there's lots of dead wood lying around here now.
You have to imagine this was black in 2018. Like when I arrived here for the first time, this was autumn 2018, black, completely silent, no insect to be heard, no bird. Trees still standing, but the ground had this ash layer, so all plant material, anything was burned. And now you see all these plants, all this has come back in 3.5 vegetation periods.
After fires, the soil is quite fertile then to begin with, isn't it?
The nutrients are released, of course, and being concentrated in the ash layer. So it's only about going there and grab them. And there are some plants obviously prepared to do this. These are the pioneer species. We are standing here in front of one which is the most important one, which is a poplar.
This one here, this one?
Aspen, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, which is a poplar species. This has been extremely effective in colonizing the area. Obviously, there are clouds of seeds of poplars flying around every year. Normally, we would not notice it because they are not able to germinate in the pine plantations.
Because the soil isn't suitable there.
Exactly. And actually, it's not only poplars. So if we look around, so this would be poplar. If you look there, there's a pine, a young pine.
Oh, sorry, I almost stepped on that
Yes.
one. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry about that. Okay.
This is a birch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Here we have a willow.
God, they're all very close together there. I mean, will these all be able to coexist?
Yeah, not for a long while, but they will find it out, like which one survives and so on.
Who climbs
But
highest?
here we have the options. No, this is great. You have the diversity, and together they are working now with the soil on the ground, with the microorganisms, and they are inducing an enormous change. And this is an interesting aspect. So fire now as a stimulus of biodiversity coming back.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to have to use my hands now to get over this log. Oh, they're all stacked here. Like Mikado tree trunks. Okay.
So you see it's chaotic and this is ecosystemic. So you would not find any square meter which resembles the other one. Yeah. So
and here you can see the bark is still burnt.
Yes.
It's still black.
Yeah.
Just pick some of this off.
And here a tree that died. You see there are insects at work, decomposing the
Yeah.
bark. You see also the fungi.
Yeah.
Now there are some specialized actually on burned bark and burned wood. So some species now being observed for the first time in this area.
Yeah.
Different things happening on simultaneously because we have different situations being created by this dynamically collapsing structure, and this is what I really like, and now it's great to see it, how this works if we allow it.
Right. And is there anything, any particular aspect where you as a scientist maybe was new to you that you weren't anticipating, that you're getting excited about, where you're sort of thinking, oh, this is actually something I didn't have on my radar at all?
I was surprised by the amount of trees actually. So I said there would be a succession, but it's sometimes and on some areas even more intensive than I thought. I would have thought that some species played a bigger role, such as birch. This was coming later now, and it's not that abundant. Poplar was amazing, and it's still amazing. So there are these tiny little surprises, I guess, small things. So like then this year we observed the poplars here and saw, the leaves are more damaged than on the area without deadwood. So how come? Maybe the damaging insects are finding a better habitat here, surviving the winter, whatever. But then on the other side, this is great, so that here more plant material is provided to the food chain and to the ecosystem. Because afterwards we will have a look at a place where everything has been cleared and plowed and planted.
forest path is maybe, I don't know, 2 to 3 meters wide. And this other side of the forest, which is, you know, the original monoculture of the pine trees, I mean, it looks like matches, really. If I think about it, it just looks like matches with a bit of green on top, and it's like a tinderbox.
Etheric oils, so they can be burned very well. Dead needles form this type of raw humus, as we say, which not decomposing well, and this is also very burnable.
And it's quite dense as well, right? It's like every 2 meters there's a tree. Every 2 or 3?
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And it's reflecting the situation that was similar here on the other side where it burned. So sooner or later this would have been harvested or thinned actually, but the fire arrived earlier. So this is a very vulnerable situation, and this is exclusively made by forestry, by this type of silviculture. No, if we had some shrubs and another type of underground vegetation, the situation would be different. So this is a pyrophilic ecosystem, we could say, and our question is, can we convert this into a pyrophobe ecosystem? And this is the name of the project, by the way.
Right. It's also a pyromaniac stream looking at this. It's, you know, the fact that in Germany there's so many monocultures. Even the Black Forest is a monoculture plantation, right? So it's like, I mean, what is still natural here?
We hardly have primary forests. We would find only very tiny patches that are close to they give an idea of how forest could be. So indeed, all the forest is managed, and it's astonishing. So there is this narrative of Germans and their forest, and they love it and so on. But it's also a story of a relationship dominated by using the forest, and this has been intensified by the invention of systematic forestry, which happened in Germany, which was a reaction to shortage of timber, clearly. But then this led also to these very planned and ordered forests that often, rather are plantations than forests.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just wondering, you know, because at the back of my house, I live close to the Siebengebirge, and there are a lot of fir trees there as well. It's
spruce, right?
Spruce, that's right. Spruce, yeah. And it's so many, and they're actually all sorts of falling over into each other. And it just looks like giant toothpicks that are just tumbling, and everything is dead. And it's something that I've sort of been quite concerned about. You know, it's particularly against the backdrop of the droughts and the extreme temperatures that we've been having these past summers. And I sort of made tentative inquiries to find out, you know, is anybody going to take care of this, or what's going to happen with this dead wood? But I mean, if I understand you correctly, then you would leave that dead wood in there, because it isn't a fire hazard if there's so much dead wood just piled up and dead trees.
Yeah. So first, the spruces, indeed, the spruce monocultures are the main victim of the extreme years. So this is what I explained before, no? So it's the combination of extreme weather, climate change induced, plus silviculture, spruces being planted also outside the natural range, where it was difficult anyway, and now they are just dying off, and landscape-wise. So this is enormous in many parts of Germany. Hundreds of thousands of hectares being lost, mainly these spruce plantations. And indeed, one of the big questions is, how do we treat these calamity areas? And there's a conventional approach, which is actually salvage logging, use the biomass which is still there, clear it up and make it tidy, and prepare the ground, and then plant trees again. And I think this is a problem, and we now see it's a problem. It's not working anymore, because you degrade the soils a lot. You have these huge areas which heat up and dry out in the extreme summers, and very often it's difficult to get the plants back. No?
But isn't it, I mean, those trees now, I mean, those spruces there, were infested with bark beetles. Isn't that a problem that don't you have to get those bark beetles out of the forest, or would it just add to infestation?
Well, this is one of the myths. So, like that, you can beat the bark beetle, but it's a symptom of a disease, which is more complex. So, like the bark beetles just come; they are the agents that kill the trees ultimately. But first, you have the weakened trees by drought, by heat, and so on. Then the trees stop producing like their defense, and then the bark beetles come. So when you have weak trees, they are affected by bark beetles. And when they are there, and when there are a lot of them, it's almost impossible to get rid of them by getting the trees out. So what is the deadwood doing actually?
Yes.
This is the other side. It's even like when a tree is dead, it's providing protection to the soil, like after a forest fire, for example, or after being killed by a bark beetle, the trees are still standing for a while and provide some shade. There is more light in the forest, but which is good. So like the light will induce succession, but the shade helps that the situation is not getting that extreme. After a while, the trees fall down, and still then would provide shade to the ground. They prevent the soil heating, which is problematic for the microorganisms in the soil, which is problematic, by the way, also for the carbon in the soil. You have more carbon emissions from clear-cut areas or areas where trees are dying when the temperature rises in the forest soil. And then the dead trees, keep on providing services in the process of restoration. So they will rot, especially when they are touching the ground. So they get humid, and then fungi and beetles and so on decompose the timber. This is getting, as I said, moist, and by the way, this is then also protecting against forest fires after a few years. And then this is becoming soil, this is becoming humus, and actually a much better soil than that existed beforehand. A soil that is better in storing water, retaining water, moisture, and also then nutrients, and providing a better substrate for regeneration.
But that sounds to me like then, there were two things that I'm taking away from what you just said. One thing was the deadwood contributes to biodiversity, it's good for the soil, it provides shade. Shade seems to be another very important aspect, that the ground has shade, so then it's not so, it can retain more moisture. But what does that mean then for forestry in general? Are you a friend of the foresters? Because it sounds like you're taking the job away from them. Do they just have to keep out of the forest then, and they haven't got anything to do with it anymore, or how does it work?
Yeah, this is a difficult situation. So I'm convinced of the importance of forests. They are providing key ecosystem services everywhere. Also in Germany, there are ecosystem services that in the past just have been taken for granted, and in a way were more or less provided also by the more intensively used plantations. But now, in the moment that we see the collapse of plantations, so we really have to ask ourselves, what do we expect from the forest? And then I want forests to provide recreation minimum, clearly landscape, like the conventional ideas, but then also in the times of climate change, climate regulation, microclimate regulation, the cooling of the landscape, the storing of the water, provision of water to the rest of the landscape, and so on. So, and then ultimately I'm interested in keeping forests as long as possible against the odds and despite climate change, which is threatening the existence of the forest. So yes, I also like timber and wood and all these products.
Because we're going to need a lot more timber in future, right? If we want to build sustainably, right?
Right, but the question is, are we able to extract it in a way that the forest is not harmed? No, and theoretically, this was the old idea of sustainable forestry, which, well, in the beginning was understood in a very basic way. So don't extract more than regrows. But then you also have to ask the question, what time span are we looking at? No, if this is working on a yearly basis, okay. But in the case of forest ecosystems, we have to look at centuries. So this model would have to work for centuries. And if we then have a plantation that collapses after 70 years or burns after 60, 70 years, so this is not really the sustainability we were dreaming of. So we have to manage the forests in a different way so that they keep on growing. And nowadays, well, unfortunately, we know it's not only about regrowing what was there earlier on, but the forest has to be functional in a way that it's also adapting to change.
Right.
Yeah, and the progressing climate change means increasing stress levels, higher temperatures, higher extremes, more pronounced drought periods, and so on. And this means the forest needs more material for its own protection, let's say.
More diversity as well, right?
And diversity, and so like what helps a forest to adapt to these changes or actually resist the growing extremes. And then biomass is a key feature. Yeah, it's the trees themselves providing the shade, closing the canopy. If we open up canopies too much, and we have been looking at also in another project actually, where we see these enormous differences. So the more you open up, the higher the average maximum temperatures. This can be a difference of like up to 8 degrees maximum temperatures on hot days. And this makes a difference because higher temperatures mean more stress to the plants, reduced productivity eventually when they have to close the stomata, the leaves, and can't do gas exchange and so on. So we recommend that foresters more consciously look at their impact on the microclimate. It's like a thermostat, so which they have in their hand. They can regulate a little bit the temperature of their forest. Mm-hmm. And in times of climate change, yes, we should do that and should strive for cooler forests, as cool as possible, and with a microclimate as buffered as possible, so that the fluctuations are not too pronounced. I'm just stopping here. Maybe I want to show you another site in this context.
Yes.
So we walk in here.
Oh, going into the monoculture?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is a big question, really, how to transform these plantations.
I'm all ears. I'm following you. Oop.
So here now we're walking, about these. We talked about these needles and the raw humus and these twigs, and this is fuel.
Yeah.
So this is on top of having pines and grass and so on. Really dangerous.
Yeah.
You see, we are here in the monoculture, but there are some black trees again. So the fire hopped over, jumping over the path, obviously here, and was controlled.
Okay.
And the trees are still living.
Right.
And some spots here with the ground fire.
Yeah, so some of these barks are still black.
And if you look here at this situation, what do you observe?
Is that poplar again?
Mm-hmm. Poplar and birch, and this means there was a small scale, almost controlled fire below the pine, and this has stimulated the growth of new trees that were unable to grow here beforehand.
I mean, it can be a blessing in disguise, a fire. It can set things right because it can reset the ecosystem.
Indeed, and this would be my proposal here. So why would we not be brave enough, if others can do it in other countries, work with fire, managing the ecosystem? So thinking about prescribed fires, controlled fires, I feel we could speed up the conversion of these pine plantations by burning the raw humus and the needles, and then we get poplars and birch and willow. Actually, they're all here as well, the three, below the pines. And then if we open it up a little bit and maybe produce some artificial deadwood, we could convert this, but we only have to want it.
Perhaps also on an emotional level, Pierre, because I'm sort of wondering, just looking at this side now of the forest, the monoculture, all the same trees, just like toothpicks, standing there. I love forests. I love being in forests, and I really love trees. But this, to me, it's eerie. It's actually, I find it slightly unnerving, a bit scary even. I don't know, I can't really say what it is, but it's not the kind of forest that I would like to go hiking in. I mean, how is it with you, your connection to trees on an emotional level, the job you're doing? Is it something, you know, I mean, how close to your heart is it? I know you're a scientist and you have to, you know, obviously look at the facts all the time, but on an emotional level, what you're seeing here and what you're doing, I mean, how does it affect you?
I think always it's important to admit that even scientists are humans, and all we do is driven to a certain extent by emotions, no? All the things that we find interesting and that stimulates certain research questions and so on. And of course, it matters. How do we feel? And as a nature conservationist, having worked actually around the globe, I've seen a lot of forests, and then I have to confirm that this is an extreme view that you just described. It's disturbing. I'm convinced even there would be anthropological arguments. I feel that this is disturbing because unnatural. So our brain is trained to live in diversity, and we know that this is stimulating ourselves, that is contributing to our recreation and to our mood and so on. There are some results, like when you have a greener environment, people are healthier and so on. So clearly here this effect would be reduced when you have the simplified industrial forestry situation. Indeed, I feel also motivation, part of the motivation of many nature conservationists, for aesthetic reasons, that they fight for another situation. And by the way, we had this fight already 100 years ago, when the earliest nature conservationists here in Prussia wrote about these monocultures and how forestry was doing harm to the landscape. This is an old discourse, and it was part of the motivation actually to become active in conservation.
Right. Because I mean, if we're looking over here now, I find it just so nice that we've got this path running straight through these two forests, the one that was burnt down and the one that is still a monoculture that's intact. But looking at the monoculture, I mean, this hasn't got any future, right? Not on any level. Not with climate change. Not with forestry making it sustainable. This is the past we're looking at, but it's still there.
Look at it, because we don't know how long it will be possible to observe such an observation. Pine is getting problems here, so we have to acknowledge it's one of the first species that arrived after the Ice Age. No, like if we go back now in time, 12,000 years ago or so, we would have seen 2 kilometers of ice above us. So this was covered by a glacier, and then it warmed up, and then 10,000 years ago, vegetation came back. And one of the earliest trees was pine, together with birch. And so this is a subarctic boreal species and montane species. And now it won't tolerate the high temperatures we are getting, and we're seeing this. So we see dieback of pines, ever more intensively, and I feel this is a risk that is still ignored and neglected here in northeastern Germany. Sooner or later we could see the same problem as we have with the spruce, no, that you described in your surroundings and in the Rhine Valley, where the spruces are dying back, and this will affect the pine as well. And yes, you are right, we're looking into the past also for this simple, efficient style of keeping trees and harvesting them. Clearly all have the same size, diameter, so you drive in there with the harvester machine, and one person can harvest a lot of trees per hour, but this is not the future. Yeah. And then of course what is frightening, about half of the forests in Germany are dominated by conifers that are now threatened and dominated by these monoculture-like situations. In Brandenburg, state of Brandenburg, 70% of our forests are dominated by pine. And if in the next years they collapse, we will have huge areas without trees.
Pierre, perhaps just
we would go back to the cars now, I suggest, and then we drive actually to the other side.
Okay, good.
Because there's a railroad and a road in between, so that we cannot cross walking.
Okay, so yeah, another short trip in the car, no worries.
In 400 Metern links abbiegen auf die B102.
That was quite a bumpy track.
This is Deutsche Welle car.
It's a Deutsche Welle car, so yeah.
It's off-road, yeah.
Okay, so this is, where are we here, Pierre?
So this is part of the same 400 hectares area which was burned, like we are here now on the other side of the road. This is privately owned forest, or it used to be forest, equally dominated by pine earlier on, but what we have to say that here the fire also very intensively has been burning the pines, and then they decided they clear the area, they use the remnants of the pines, actually selling it for energetic purpose, like for fuel, and then preparing the ground, plowing the soil and planting trees.
So this is, I mean, looking at this now, it is very green. I can see a lot of young trees. There's hardly any dead wood, right? So they took out all the dead wood.
Yes, yeah.
And
the point is, you mentioned now the green trees. All these green trees you can observe have not been planted.
Oh, really?
So this is the interesting part of the story. So the planted trees are not visible. They died, or they fight.
Oh my God.
And we see now, well, classical, no? The poplars, aspen. We see some birches. This is the spontaneous succession that has worked here as well. But yeah, let us now search for the planted trees.
Yeah, let's have a look. Because I'm just wondering if you say the owner went to so much trouble to have the land cleared, ploughed, then planted trees, well, that's a colossal waste of money then.
Yes, yeah. So they earned some money by selling the wood chips, but actually they lost the money again by losing the plants. So the plants that were planted, most of them actually died, so 80% mortality or so. So here we see areas where sometimes they planted a second time or third time, and some different owners here. Learned their lessons, and others still insist. So, for example, this is an area where they cleared the successional vegetation.
Yeah.
So they wiped out the poplars and everything, plowed and planted last year. And you still see these pines here.
Right. Tiny
which
pines.
Are struggling. Yeah, very small.
Yeah.
And definitely smaller than the poplars that just have been regrowing since last year.
In fact, they're so small they almost look like weeds compared to the poplars, who are standing tall, almost at 2 meters compared to these. And the people now owning these plots, I mean, with all these poplars coming up here now, I mean, Are they going to harvest those then eventually? What are they going to do with them?
I hope that they will be happy with the poplar finally, and I know some of them are, no, because we have even the obligation by law after a calamity to reforest, and this can be done by planting or by natural succession, and some of them are happy for having the poplar doing the job. And then let's see if other trees come in. I'm sure there will be other trees coming in, and if you don't like the forest in 5 or 10 years or 15 years, why not then plant some trees? But then maybe it won't be easier, but maybe it's more feasible with the poplars at least providing some more protection.
Pierre, thank you very much for your time today. I've learned a lot. Also, just to reiterate that, the trees behind my house, the spruce. I mean, initially I was in favour of, having that cleared. But if anybody came up with that idea now in the community, I can say to them, listen, there's a professor, he's called Pierre Ibisch. He would recommend leaving all this deadwood in the forest. Am I right in summarising that?
Yes, pretty much so. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Pierre. This week's episode of On the Green Fence was produced by Natalie Muller and myself. Our sound engineer was Michael Springer. Please do email us any feedback, questions or proposals that you might have. You can reach us at onthegreenfence@dw.com. And if you've got this far and would like to support this Environment podcast, you can write a short and sweet review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps us to reach more listeners with our content. Thanks for listening to On the Green Fence. My name is Neil King. Take it easy and take care.